Welcome back, viewers. You're watching WION's Speed News Edition. I'm Shivan Janna. We have our signer, Ms. Rajni, with us. Let's get started. At least 116 people have been killed and more than 300 others injured in the magnitude 6.2 earthquake in China's Gansu province. The authorities have launched an emergency response and intensive rescue operations are underway. Chinese President Xi Jinping has called for all-out efforts in search and relief work. The earthquake set off massive tremors, flattening homes and buildings and causing heavy economic damage. The earthquake cut off power and a water supply and transportation services in Gansu province and also some parts of the adjoining Qinghai province. It was followed by several aftershocks. Hamas released a video of 3 Israeli hostages pleading for their release. All 3 reportedly aged between 79 and 84 could be seen seated on chairs at an undisclosed location. Israel has strongly condemned the release of the video and called it a criminal terror video. Talks for the release of the remaining hostages in Gaza have been resumed. The CIA chief met the Qatari Prime Minister and the head of Israel's Mossad spy agency in Warsaw. They discussed a potential new deal. The Mossad chief was also reported to have met with the Qatari Prime Minister in Norway on Friday night. Hamas officials have meanwhile reiterated that a potential deal will only be possible if Israelis stop their attacks. A rocket fired by the Hezbollah militants in Lebanon hit the northern Israeli city of Kiryat Shmona. However, no casualties were reported. Earlier in the day, Israel was fighting near its northern border using fighter jets to strike Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. Israel and the Hezbollah group have been exchanging fire along the frontier on an almost daily basis since the war in Gaza erupted. The violence, which has largely been contained to the border area, has killed more than 130 people in Lebanon, including 94 Hezbollah militants and 17 civilians. In Israel, the hostilities have killed 8 soldiers and 4 civilians. Another 102 wounded and ailing Gazans have been taken to Turkey for treatment. A Turkish military plane carrying the patients arrived in Ankara. Turkey has already taken in several hundred wounded and sick Palestinians and their companions for treatment. According to reports, preparations for setting up field hospitals in Gaza have begun, and a suitable location near the Rafah border crossing has been identified. The US has announced a 10-nation bloc to counter the Houthi threat in the Red Sea in a bid to try to safeguard commercial shipping vessels. The Yemen rebels say they are supporting Palestinians under siege by Israel in the Gaza Strip. A statement on Tuesday by US Defense Secretary identified several countries taking part in an international force. The security coalition includes the United States, the United Kingdom, Bahrain, Canada, France, Italy, Netherlands, Norway, Seychelles, and Spain. Now, it is unclear if they are willing to do what US warships have done of late, which is shoot down Houthi missiles and drones. The Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin is all set to hold talks with Chinese Premier Li Qiang in Beijing. The two countries have ramped up economic and diplomatic cooperation in recent years. Ties have grown even closer since Moscow's invasion of Ukraine, despite Beijing's insistence that it is neutral in the conflict. Mishustin was greeted upon arrival by Chinese Deputy Foreign Minister, Chinese Ambassador to Russia, and Russian Ambassador to China. Chinese Foreign Ministry said Mishustin's visit is a part of a series of regular meetings with his counterpart Li Qiang. The Russian Prime Minister also travelled to Shanghai and Beijing in May, where he met President Xi Jinping and signed a series of trade deals. Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott has signed a law allowing state law enforcement to arrest people suspected of crossing the US-Mexico border illegally. This law grants local law enforcement the power to arrest migrants and judges the ability to issue orders to remove them to Mexico. Now, the law known as SB 4 will take effect in March and create a new state crime for illegal entry or re-entry into Texas. The law is expected to take effect in March. The new legislation has sent ripples of fear throughout the Latino community in Texas, which makes up 40% of the state's population. The population crosses illegally, which can already be charged with illegal entry or re-entry under federal laws. But Abbott has sharply criticized US President Joe Biden for failing to enforce them. Kenya and the European Union have signed a long negotiated trade agreement to increase the flow of goods between the two markets. This comes as Brussels aims to strengthen economic ties with Russia. The Economic Partnership Agreement that will grant the East African nations exports duty-free status and unlimited access to the bloc. Both sides had initialed a draft deal in June after 7 months of negotiations. The 27-nation bloc accounts for more than 20% of Kenya's overall exports, making it Kenya's biggest export market. The EU has said that the deal is the most ambitious economic partnership it had with a developing country. Hundreds of Serbian opposition supporters rallied outside the State Election Commission in Belgrade on Monday, claiming that Sunday's parliamentary election was rigged. Supporters of the opposition alliance, Serbia Against Violence, tried to break through a security fence and pelted the commission's building with tomatoes and eggs. Opposition leaders submitted evidence of election fraud and announced that they would go on a hunger strike until the commission meets opposition demands. The opposition alleged election law violations in parliament polls, including voter registration fraud, bribery and result rigging, and demanded the election be rerun. In a landmark ruling, the Vatican has formally approved Christian priests blessing same-sex couples. The Vatican said that priests can administer blessings as long as the couples are not part of regular church rituals. The Vatican's new declaration is seen as a major step forward in the church's ministry to LGBTQ people and recognizes the deep desire in many same-sex couples for God's presence in their relationships. It opens the door to non-liturgical blessings for same-sex couples, something that had been previously off limits for bishops, priests and deacons. Many have described the move as a major step forward in the church's stand on the LGBTQ community. The Constitutional Court of Uganda has begun hearing the first challenge to a draconian anti-gay law. The law had triggered criticism from the United Nations and led to United States visa restrictions on government officials. The East African nation adopted one of the world's harshest laws against homosexuality in May this year. The latest legislation contains provisions making aggravated homosexuality a capital offence and imposes penalties for consensual same-sex relations of up to life in prison. This had prompted an uproar by rights advocates and Western powers. US President Joe Biden had even threatened to cut aid investments to the country. However, President Yoweri Museveni's government has been defiant. Britain's Prince William and Foreign Secretary David Cameron are in Kuwait to pay their condolences on behalf of King Charles following the passing of the late Emir Sheikh Nawaf Sabah. The royal family holds long-standing ties with Kuwait, as shown by the late royal's 3 visits to the UK in 2023. One of these occasions was to celebrate King Charles and Queen Camilla's coronation in May. The late Kuwait's royal was also a guest of government in August, and he met King Charles briefly in October. During their trip, Prince William and David Cameron also met with Kuwait's new Emir Sheikh Mishal Al Sabah. Foreign dignitaries from around the world arrived in the Gulf state of Kuwait to offer condolences. At least 13 people have been killed and over 178 are left injured after a blast at an oil terminal in Guinea's capital city, Conakry. Firefighters worked through the afternoon to fully extinguish the blaze. However, the extent of the damage to the terminal remains unclear. The blast at the West African nation's main oil terminal rocked the Kaloum administrative district in downtown Conakry. Guinea is not an oil producer and has no refining capacity. It imports refined products, mostly stored in the Kaloum terminal and distributed via trucks across the country. The government has assured that an investigation will be launched to determine what caused the incident. As fresh cases of a new sub-variant of COVID are coming in from across the world, the Indian government has issued a vigilance advisory to all states. The states have been asked to report all suspected cases. According to the latest data from the Union Health Ministry, 127 fresh cases have been reported across the country, with 111 and one reported death from Kerala. 15 cases of the new JN1 subvariant have also been detected in Goa. Following this spike in neighbouring states, Karnataka Health Minister Gundu Rao has announced a mandatory mask advisory for everyone over the age of 60 in the state. Kerala's Health Minister Veena George has said the JN1 subvariant was earlier detected in 15 people flying into the country from Singapore. After weeks of keeping Iceland on the edge and prompting mass evacuations in neighbouring towns, the Fagradalsfjall volcano on the southwest tip of Reykjanes has finally erupted. The volcano's eruption took place at approximately 10:15 p.m. local time. As seen in this footage captured in the proximity, the moment of eruption illuminated the Icelandic night sky. The eruption was bright enough to be seen by the naked eye over 24 kilometers away in the town of Keflavik. Authorities have issued a nationwide alert, with Iceland's civil defense warning the public to steer clear of the volcano region. Emergency personnel assessed the situation. North Korea launched its most powerful solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile. The test launch of the solid-fuel Hwasong-18 came a day after the nuclear-powered submarine USS Missouri made port in South Korea's Busan. US and South Korea also gave a warning that a nuclear attack by Pyongyang would mean the end of the Kim regime. Japanese prosecutors searched the offices of the ruling party over a funding scandal. The scandal has said that, as per the forced Prime Minister Fumio Kishida to replace 4 ministers last week. Investigators entered a building that houses the offices of the largest faction of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party. The party is reeling from reports that officials took kickbacks of $3.4 million. Heavy rain, flash floods and snow were left in the wake of a coastal storm across the eastern United States on Monday. Trees were seen fallen and rivers were rising in Massachusetts. Pennsylvania and New Hampshire are in the same spate. More than 5 inches of rain fell in parts of New Jersey and northeastern Pennsylvania. Mass transit systems, including the New York City subway, were hit by delays and cancellations. Meanwhile, more than 660,000 utility customers from Connecticut up to Maine were left without power. The National Weather Service said the storm will move northward into eastern Canada by Monday. Meanwhile, heavy rain is expected for the northern mid-Atlantic coast, northward to New England. The Bank of Japan maintained ultra-loose monetary settings in a widely expected move, underscoring policymakers' reference to await more clues on whether wages will rise enough to keep inflation durably around its 2% target. The central bank also made no change to its dovish policy guidance, dashing hopes among some traders that it would tweak the language to signal a near-term end to negative interest rates. Markets are focusing on any clues that the central bank offers at a post-meeting briefing on how soon the central bank could take short-term rates out of negative territory. Apple will stop selling its latest watches in the US after the country found it had violated patent rights. An order barring sales and imports of watches with the disputed blood oxygen feature is due to go into effect on 26th December. Apple has said that it plans to appeal the decision, but would preemptively remove the devices from its US site on 21st of December and from stores in the country after Christmas Eve. Sales elsewhere are not affected.